I can't believe it. It is you, isn't it? It's really you.
Roy.
Happy?
Yes.
Completely?
Yes.
Ecstatically?
Yes.
No doubts.
Vivien Leigh was the face of Scarlett O'Hara, timeless beauty, unstoppable talent, and a legend in her own right. But behind the glittering facade was a woman fighting demons the world couldn't see. This is the haunting true story Hollywood tried to bury. The Untold Battle of Vivien Leigh. The rise of a star, talent that couldn't be denied. Born in colonial India in 1913, Vivien Leigh moved to England at a young age, where she was quickly drawn to the stage. With poise, striking beauty, and sharp intelligence, she stood out even in a sea of rising stars. She trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and quickly landed small film roles that caught critics' attention. But it wasn't just her looks. Her performances had a depth that left directors stunned. She married at 19 and had a daughter, but her passion for acting quickly eclipsed her personal life. Audiences were mesmerized by her presence. She was not just acting, she was becoming. When she saw Gone with the Wind being cast, she knew Scarlett O'Hara was hers, even if the studio didn't know it yet. She worked tirelessly to be taken seriously, refusing to coast on her appearance. By the late 1930s, Vivien was a name whispered in every studio boardroom. But her rise was only the beginning of a much more complicated story. Gone with the Wind, Glory with a Hidden. Cost landing the role of Scarlett O'Hara wasn't luck, it was obsession and determination. Out of 1/400 actresses, she was chosen, in part due to the insistence of Laurence Olivier, her lover and soon-to-be husband. Filming was brutal. Long hours, high-pressure scenes, and constant rewrites tested even the most experienced actors. Vivien worked through exhaustion, heat, and illness, hiding her growing emotional instability from the crew. Her portrayal was so intense that many believed she was channeling something deeply personal. She won an Academy Award for Best Actress, but instead of joy, it brought mounting pressure. Critics now expected perfection, and she was terrified of being labeled a one-role wonder. Privately, she began experiencing severe mood swings, highs of energy and charm followed by crushing lows. But in Hollywood, mental health was taboo. Vivien smiled through the pain, and no one dared ask questions. Her greatest role came at a cost. She had become Scarlett and couldn't find her way back. The love of Laurence Olivier, passion or prison. Vivien and Laurence Olivier were the golden couple, beautiful, talented, and madly in love. Their chemistry burned on stage and screen, from Shakespeare to steamy romances. But behind closed doors, the relationship was complicated, stormy, and often destructive. Vivien's bipolar disorder, undiagnosed for years, created cycles of affection and rage that Olivier couldn't understand. He was devoted, but also ambitious and controlling, often prioritizing his career over her well-being. Their fights were legendary in British theater circles, with smashed objects and public outbursts. Still, they were magnetic together, and neither could fully walk away. They became codependent, each needing the other to feel whole, even as they unraveled. Olivier tried to protect her, but didn't know how, and she often felt like a burden. Their love story wasn't just passion. It was a slow-burning tragedy hidden behind red carpets and curtain calls. A hidden illness. The shadows of bipolar disorder. Vivien Leigh lived with what we now understand as bipolar disorder, though it was not diagnosed at the time. She experienced soaring highs, where she was euphoric, creative, and magnetic. But those were always followed by crashing lows, leaving her exhausted, irritable, and unable to function. During depressive episodes, she couldn't get out of bed or remember lines. Directors became frustrated. In manic states, she would go days without sleep, often becoming paranoid or emotionally explosive. At times, she was institutionalized and given electric shock therapy, the standard but brutal treatment of the era. Friends described her as a woman split in two, the elegant icon and the tormented soul. Vivien herself was aware something was wrong, but feared being labeled mad and cast out. Hollywood wanted perfection, not vulnerability, so she hid her truth under layers of glamour. But behind the scenes, she was drowning in a condition that had no name, no mercy, and no cure. triumph on stage, but isolation behind the curtain. Even as her film opportunities dwindled, Vivien found triumph in the theater. She won her second Oscar for A Streetcar Named Desire, playing Blanche Dubois, another fragile, unraveling woman. The role hit painfully close to home, and friends feared she was reliving her own breakdown on stage. Audiences applauded, critics raved, but inside she felt like she was breaking piece by piece. The backstage world offered no comfort. Actors feared her outbursts and retreated from closeness. She would forget entire passages of dialogue, then flawlessly deliver them moments later in a trance-like state. The pressure to perform kept her going, even when her health was failing. Her diaries from this period show a woman begging for calm, for silence, for rest. She loved acting, but it came to feel like both refuge and punishment. She was never more brilliant, or more alone. Hollywood turns away. The silent rejection. Vivien's illness worsened. Hollywood's interest began to fade. Directors labeled her difficult, unstable, and unreliable, often ignoring the reasons behind her behavior. She lost roles to younger, less complicated actresses, and her star slowly dimmed. Producers didn't want to insure her films, a cruel blow for someone who once carried box office gold. She was invited to fewer parties, fewer premieres, and the gossip columns whispered with pity instead of awe. Olivier, too, began pulling away, emotionally and professionally. After 20 years, he left her for actress Joan Plowright, shattering Vivien's already fragile world. Though publicly graceful about the split, privately she spiraled into depression and erratic behavior. She wasn't just losing work, she was losing herself. In a town that claimed to love her, she was suddenly invisible. Later years, the battle quietly rages. Vivien never stopped fighting, even when everything seemed lost. She continued acting on stage, even as her health deteriorated from chronic tuberculosis. She endured coughing fits mid-performance, collapsing from exhaustion only to rise again for curtain call. Her final years were marked by brief romances, quiet days in the English countryside, and fewer headlines. She had moments of peace, but the illness never fully released her. Despite her fading public presence, she never gave up on her art or her dignity. She wrote letters, read voraciously, and reflected deeply on her choices and regrets. Friends said she became more tender, more philosophical, still witty, still radiant. Though the world saw less of her, those closest to her saw something else: bravery. She had faced life's fiercest storms, and she had stood scarred, but unbowed. Her final breath, and a lasting silence. On July 8, 1967, Vivien Leigh died in her London apartment at just 53 years old. The cause: complications from tuberculosis, worsened by years of physical and emotional strain. She was found by her partner, actor Jack Merivale, who had cared for her in her final days with devotion and tenderness. News of her death spread. Quickly, stunning fans and peers alike, tributes poured in, not just for her talent, but for her courage. Laurence Olivier, who had once been her everything, wept at her funeral and later said she was so lovely, so full of promise. The world had lost one of its brightest lights, dimmed far too soon. But even in death, she remained an enigma. Beautiful, tragic, unforgettable. She was buried with a bouquet of violets, her favorite flower, near her home in London. And with her passing, an era of Hollywood brilliance faded into memory. Legacy reclaimed. More than just a tragic beauty in the years since her death, Vivien Leigh's life has been re-examined with new compassion. No longer just remembered as Scarlett or Blanche, she is now seen as a pioneer for mental health awareness. Her diaries, letters, and interviews reveal a woman of sharp intellect, vulnerability, and immense courage. She lived in a time when mental illness was shameful, yet she battled it with defiant grace. Actresses today cite her as a trailblazer, one who bled for her craft and loved without limit. Her performances remain electric, timeless, a masterclass in human emotion. Vivien Leigh wasn't just a star, she was a survivor, and she deserves to be remembered not for her tragedy, but for her triumph, for the roles she played and the war she fought behind them. and for proving that even the most fragile hearts can leave the strongest legacy. A legacy of strength. The real Vivien Leigh emerges. Though her life was filled with unimaginable pressure, personal loss, and misunderstood illness, Vivien Leigh's legacy today is more powerful than ever. Modern audiences now view her not just as a tragic beauty or a flawless performer, but as a woman who defied the stigma of mental illness in silence. She managed to thrive in an industry that celebrated her face but ignored her suffering. With posthumous biographies, documentaries, and re-released performances, her life is now seen through a more empathetic lens. Vivien's private letters and journals reveal wit, insight, and intense emotional intelligence, dispelling the myth that she was simply fragile. Actors and mental health advocates alike have praised her resilience, pointing to her as a symbol of enduring grace under pressure. In many ways, she was ahead of her time, navigating bipolar disorder without treatment or support, yet still leaving behind a towering body of work. She continues to inspire not only performers, but anyone struggling to be seen beyond their pain. Vivien Leigh's true legacy is not in her tragedy, but in her quiet, tireless fight to live with dignity. And now, at last, the world is finally beginning to understand who she really was. Vivien Leigh's story isn't just one of fame, it's one of fearless vulnerability in a world that punished honesty. She was a goddess on screen, but a warrior in life, battling stigma, heartbreak, and illness with silent strength. And though Hollywood buried her truth, today we honor it and her.